Coronavirus doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican.
The global coronavirus pandemic casts a shadow over the 2020 U.S. presidential race as former Vice President Joe Biden sweeps the Democratic primaries in another Super Tuesday win. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden, dealing a crushing blow to rival Bernie Sanders, all but clinching the party's nomination. Sanders, meantime, refusing to bow out, saying he's staying in the fight. All this as the coronavirus takes center stage, threatening to upend the election. We begin our coverage with CGTN's Nathan King, live at the White House. And Nathan, as the number of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. Continues to rise, what impact will the pandemic have on the race for the White House?
Oh my, it's just quite incredible. I mean, I was in Michigan for the primary just over a week ago, and you could see the entire election campaign amongst the Democrats for the nomination completely pivot to coronavirus. 1 minute Bernie Sanders was talking about tuition free for all, and then the next minute he was holding a panel on the coronavirus with medical experts pushing, of course, his Medicare for all. We saw Joe Biden do pretty much the same. Remember, they cancelled after last Tuesday's results. Both were meant to have rallies in Cleveland, Ohio. They didn't go ahead because local authorities said, no, we don't want a lot of people coming together. That has just got more and more the same. You saw it in turnout in the last 24 hours in some of these primaries. Young people haven't been turning out for Bernie Sanders in the way that he'd hoped. But guess what? They are more and more staying at home as well as other age groups. And also, even though you might think that this is now the time for sort of Bernie Sanders ideas to catch hold in the U.S., especially when it comes to free access to medicine at the point of delivery for all, Medicare for all, you know, he's sort of suffered from the fact that he hasn't been sort of at the top of a government during a crisis. Joe Biden, of course, was vice president here in Washington during the financial crisis of 2008, very much involved in the auto bailout, things like that. So there has been a sort of movement towards someone with experience. So we've got all that, and just, you know, the way it's campaigning. You can't get out there and press the flesh anymore. No kissing babies.
Nathan, you know, this is going to affect the American people. It's going to hit them really hard. We've already heard of a number of job losses.
Absolutely.
The United States Senate just passed a multi-billion-dollar aid package. What kind of relief can Americans expect from this bill?
Right, this is the second of three, and the big one's coming in stage 3. Let me just tell you about the one that just passed. Essentially, what that is doing is giving benefits to not all, but a lot of Americans. That's unemployment benefits, that's free testing for the coronavirus and treatment as well. It's also going to help with sort of making sure there's access to food for people who are on food stamps and the like. So, and there are other benefits as well. But the big one is coming in the next few days, or maybe a week or so, up to $1 trillion. Essentially, American taxpayers are going to be wired money into their accounts, not once, but twice, we understand. American businesses supported to the tune of $300, $400, maybe $500 billion. There's going to be a lot of insurance when it comes to people being able to stay at home for 2 weeks. This is, you know, this is not a platform that Republicans would normally have passed. This is essentially socialism, a lot of it, what the Democratic Party are running on. And this is going to be very interesting in the run-up to the November election. What sort of platform are the Republicans going to run on if some of the things they've done are essentially out of a Democratic Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Andrew Yang playbook? So that's going to be very interesting. But there is only one issue now on the minds of Americans, and that's the coronavirus. Joe Biden obviously seen as a safe pair of hands for the Democrats. And remember, they've cancelled all these rallies, which brings me back to the White House. Here you've seen, since Monday, the president appear every day in front of his coronavirus task force, talking for an hour. He doesn't go to rallies anymore. He's behind the podium here at the White House. Now, a lot of people maybe suggest he should have done that for the past 3 years. He has the advantage now of looking presidential.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. That's Nathan King there for us at the White House. For more, let's bring in our panel. Mary C. Curtis joins us from Charlotte in North Carolina. She's a columnist for Roll Call. Joel Rubin is a Democratic strategist and political commentator and analyst. He joins us here in Washington via Skype. With us from Dallas, Texas, Merrill Matthews is resident scholar at the Institute for Policy Innovation. And Amisha Cross joins us over Skype in Washington. She's a political analyst and Democratic strategist. Welcome to all of you. Amisha, let me start with you. More victories for Joe Biden on Tuesday. He's now scored a string of victories after his campaign really turned around after that landslide win in South Carolina. That was about 2.5 weeks ago. Here is Joe Biden, the former vice president, talking on Tuesday night after the results became apparent. Let's watch.
So let me say, especially to the young voters who have been inspired by Senator Sanders, I hear you. I know what's at stake. I know what we have to do. Our goal as a campaign, and my goal as a candidate for president, is to unify this party and then to unify the nation.
So Biden has succeeded, Amisha, in building a coalition that has given them these primary wins. But as we just heard, his campaign is clearly concerned about young voters who've been following Senator Bernie Sanders. How does he get them?
I think that Joe Biden's campaign I wouldn't say concerned is the word that I would use. I would definitely say that he knows that as the Democratic Party continues to grow and continues to envelope, it also will push more left of center ideas. And I think that he's trying to work towards that. Right now, we've seen time after time that the younger voters honestly aren't showing up. As a millennial myself, I'm gravely disappointed in this, but I think that for Joe Biden right now, it's showcasing to them that he has this very strong leadership capacity that also is welcoming and is also inclusive to their ideas and to their goals. We've also seen him take into consideration and even talk about implementing some parts of Bernie Sanders' plans, specifically when he's talking about helping those who are disenfranchised, those who are working 2 or 3 jobs, those who are going to need some type of safeguard when it comes to unemployment benefits or job training and things like that. These are all things that previously were seen as far left ideas, especially when it comes to government funding of a lot of the large scale programs that we're seeing him now be a little bit more akin to. And I would argue that the results of the coronavirus and the economic fallout we're seeing from that is also driving a lot of that information and that push from Joe Biden.
Right, so he gets those young voters by embracing many of the policies that Bernie Sanders has been talking about. Joel Rubin, no doubt deep disappointment among Bernie Sanders supporters and voters, judging from social media posts. There also seems to be a lot of frustration because many of them felt that he treated Biden with kid gloves during that last debate last Sunday. He was reluctant, as I've seen many say, to deliver a killer punch to Biden. But why do you think he fared so badly?
Well, I'll start on the last point. I don't think he was reluctant. I think that what Senator Sanders did was engage in a robust debate with the former vice president and was really strong in terms of pushing his arguments. And it is hard to see how he could have chosen a different path, especially if he wants to do what he says, which is to unite the party and defeat Donald Trump in the fall. And that's something that the senator has always been talking about. But to this question about getting the Sanders supporters on board, it's a real live question. Clearly, the delegate math is in Joe Biden's favor, and he made an attempt last night as well to talk about the policy issues and how he's going to pool some of those into his platform. And that's all well and good, but that's not going to necessarily get the Sanders supporters on board right away, because it's not just about policy pivoting. It's really about expressing an understanding of the concerns that the movement behind Bernie Sanders is all about. Health care for all, ensuring that there's quality education and forgiveness of college debt. These are core identity issues for many of the supporters, and we can go down the list of other issues as well. But Joe Biden's going to need to do more than just talk about a couple of policy initiatives that maybe he'll change his tune on if he wants to really get the energy and enthusiasm from that significant chunk of the Democratic base.
Joel, so would it be fair to say that Senator Sanders put party unity above taking on Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think that what the senator was doing was making it clear that he has serious disagreements with Joe Biden on many policy issues, but he was making it a policy argument. And that's to the credit of the senator and to the Democratic unity objective as well as a whole. We need to ensure that Donald Trump is thrown out of office, in November, this coming election, and that his presidency comes to a crashing end. And I think all Democrats feel that way. But Senator Sanders does have real substantive disagreements, and his supporters do as well have a lot of concerns about Joe Biden's commitment to those issues. And that's where the senator was pushing the argument. And I think that's why he framed the things the way he did in that debate.
All right, let me bring in Mary C. Curtis from Charlotte, North Carolina. Mary, we've been talking politics here so far, but of course the dominant story in the country right now is the coronavirus outbreak. By far, we see people talk about this on television all the time, but is this election going to be a referendum on how President Trump handles this challenge?
Well, definitely. I believe that this shows that despite what you think of what's going on in politics, that something unexpected can happen, and that can roil and transform a campaign. And right now, people want leadership, they want truth, they want transparency. And they see that the president was a little late to this. He, weeks ago, accused the Democrats of being part of a hoax, that this coronavirus was a hoax. And now he's taking it seriously. But it's really helped Joe Biden because he's been acting quasi-presidential, speaking in front of flags, and leaning on his experience, saying, I was there, bringing up the fact that the Trump administration disbanded the global health unit that the Obama administration had put in place in the National Security Council. And so he has been talking about that experience, being steady. And also, you could see when Joe Biden was winning a lot of these primaries that Wall Street, in fact, steadied a bit because, of course, Wall Street hates volatility, and there's been so much uncertainty with this presidency. And it looks like this will last for months going into, right into the campaign, possibly. We don't know how long it will last. But it also has leaned into some of the weaknesses of Donald Trump. He's been questioning of science, the way he has actually let go many experts, because the criterion for being in his administration was loyalty to Donald Trump, not expertise, and the fact that he has been less than truthful often. So you have to trust the leader. So definitely this will be a big issue, I believe, in the campaign, and proof again that you never know what's going to happen. And as you say, Republicans have often said that government should be smaller. It should shrink. Government is a bad thing. Well, something like this coronavirus crisis, it makes people realize that they want government. They just want efficient government, government that will support them, government that works.
Merrill Matthews, Mary C. Curtis raises the point there that President Trump has been lacking in truth, leadership, and transparency. In fact, he came to that very late in handling this coronavirus outbreak. Is that going to hurt him?
Well, it may. One of the lessons that I think most politicians learned after the Katrina hurricane is that you don't want to look like you are under-responding to these kinds of events. You want to look like you're on top of it and moving ahead very quickly. And I think every politician in the country has learned that lesson. Donald Trump, not being a politician historically, may be a little bit late to it, but it's at least possible that we may look back on this and say, not only did we respond very quickly, but we may have even over-responded a little bit on some of these things we just don't know right now.
And what about the question that I asked Mary a moment ago, Merrill, that this will be a referendum on how President Trump handles this from here on until the election?
Well, yeah, prior to this, the question was whether or not it was a good economy that was going strong. And if you're an incumbent president running for re-election in a good economy, you virtually always win. And so with the economy looking like it's not going to be there for him now, we don't know if it can come back very quickly. He wanted to be able to say that he is taking the role of leadership, and he wants to pretend or to present himself as a leader. And he's certainly around there a lot, as was mentioned. And my guess is the country is looking at him and saying he certainly seems to be trying to lead right now. So that may help him.
Right, I get the point, Merrill, that he can't point to the economy because, we can see the markets are taking a battering. But on the other hand, could he say to the American people, look what I'm doing right now. I've got these bills that have been passed in the United States Congress, which is going to put money in your pocket, which is going to help businesses around the country. I'm trying to maintain employment as much as I can.
And then
I'll
I'll get
think
you,
that's
Joel.
absolutely right.
I have to interject.
Go ahead, Merrill.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I think it's exactly what he's going to say. Interestingly, because Bernie Sanders and to some extent Joe Biden want to spend an awful lot of government money, you have to wonder if there's going to be any money left to be spent after we get through these various stimulus packages.
Okay. Joel, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to be very clear, and we can't let this stand, this kind of gaslighting or confusion sowing. Yeah. The American government is not overreacting to the coronavirus. That is a dangerous statement to make on television. Right. For 2 months, the American government did not react, and right now we have school systems across the country shutting down. We have the state of California essentially being locked down, people living in place. This is a situation where the virus is spreading, and we don't even have enough testing to know how exponentially it has grown. So the idea that somehow there's an overreaction, Donald Trump's a great leader, is completely inverse of reality, which is that President Trump misled the American people for 2 months about the dangers of this virus, and now we're in a dire situation. The spending of the money is to prevent a complete economic collapse. It is not something that the Democrats were calling for. This is being called for by the American people because the economy is in free fall. We need to be clear about this.
Okay, very quick. I'll get to you, Mary. A very quick response from Merrill, and then I'm going to get to Mary.
Yeah, I simply said that we may come back and look at it as a possible overreaction. We don't know right now because we're not there.
Okay.
It's very dangerous to say on television.
All right, Mary, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just was also going to say that, as your reporter pointed out, it points to some of the weaknesses in our system in America, our healthcare system. As you said, some of the issues that Bernie Sanders pointed out, the fact that we don't have a lot of paid sick leave, the fact in our education system that so many children are getting their meals in schools. And so we have a lot of this food insecurity, the fact that childcare is so expensive that so many working parents depend on schools. So this crisis is pointing out quite a few weaknesses in our system and the way that the social safety net has been weakened through the last decades.
The coronavirus is elevating things. I'm definitely not going to give, Bernie Sanders all the credit for that elevation within his campaign, because we've been talking about it for decades, especially those of us who've worked in poverty and anti-poverty legislation. When it comes to not having enough hospital beds, when it comes to community clinics being slashed and the funding going away, largely in Republican-led areas, when it comes to this president cutting funds to the CDC, there are a lot of issues that we have. But I did want to go back to one point, because there was a conversation, I think that Joel brought it up, around there being some sort of unity by Bernie Sanders staying in this race. That is absolutely not what is happening. What Bernie Sanders is doing is elongating the inevitable. What he should be doing is announcing his departure and making sure that he is bringing his people around to the importance of the one goal that matters most to the Democratic Party, making sure that they get Donald Trump out of the White House. That is the goal, not a long and drawn-out primary battle for a candidate who has already proven himself to be defeated.
All right, Joel, is that a mistake on Bernie Sanders' part to draw this out?
Well, Joe Biden hasn't called for Bernie Sanders to leave, and I think that Joe Biden understands politics very well and understands how to build coalitions. I served in the Senate when Joe Biden was a senator there. I was a staffer, clearly. Joe Biden gets it, and he understands that. Excuse me. He understands that to have a different outcome from 2016, where that kind of coalition was not built, he's going to have to work this, and he's going to have to work it in a way that actually brings people.
All of the evidence and all of
one moment,
right now
you can't just demand. You can't just demand.
The place that Bernie Sanders played well in 2016, he is completely losing in 2020.
This kind of way of responding when I'm explaining how you do it is indicative of a problem. You can't demand that supporters of another candidate immediately give up and go to the other side. I concur with the idea that we need to unify, but the way you get there, look at Joe Biden, follow his cues. He's actually doing it in an elegant way.
Okay, Amisha, let me ask you about this. We've been talking about Biden policies and what exactly he is offering voters. We know that he doesn't like the idea of Medicare for all. In fact, he told the United States Network that even if both houses passed a Medicare for all bill, he would veto it. He also told a group of very rich fundraisers last June in New York Nothing would fundamentally change. That's a quote. He also boasts that he wrote the omnibus crime bill that has given us mass incarceration. So how does he sell himself to the electorate right now?
He talks to the electorate about it coming from a place of honesty, and I think that it's important that people do understand the impact of the crime bill. But we also have to understand that 80% of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus at the time, was behind the crime bill. So were Black pastors, so were Black legislators across the country. People wanted to see change in their communities. They did not understand the unintended consequences years down the road. So if we're going to hold his feet to the fire, we also have to hold, and somebody, myself, coming from the Black community, who had an incarcerated parent, who understands what this actually means.
All right, then what about,
people to the fire as
okay,
well. So
okay,
I
what
don't
about,
think that is something we can just automatically dissuade. And
right,
Joe
what
Biden.
about him saying nothing will fundamentally change, and if Medicare for All bill crossed my desk, I would veto it?
Well, I think he's absolutely correct. A lot of people like their private health insurance. They like to be able to make that decision. For those who do not have private health insurance, we do have to make sure that we are doing what President Obama had initially enacted and worked on, that we provide health insurance, that we expand Medicaid, that we make sure that those individuals are also covered. I don't think that it's smart to take away people's private health insurance who really like the health insurance plans that they're currently provided by their employers.
Right.
I believe
I
you'll
like to
also see
hold-
him.
Mary, go ahead.
I
believe
think
you'll
we need to
also
be
see
nuanced.
Joel, I'll
Vice
get you. I'll
President.
get you, Joel. Mary,
Yeah.
go ahead.
You'll also see the Vice President Biden trying to reach out for unity in the person he chooses as Vice President. And he has talked about he would commit to choose a woman. And I believe that'll be a piece of him trying to reach out. He'll be trying, I think more than in most years, that the Vice President chooses as his running mate will be quite important. The electorate will have to see that person as president.
Yeah. Mary, at a time like this, when we see the coronavirus sweeping the country, can former Vice President Biden afford to say things like, look, if people want to keep their private insurance, they can keep it? And we have seen right now what the fact that 80 million Americans either are underinsured or have no insurance, and what that can do.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you've seen in the primaries so far that even people who are supportive of Medicare for All have been voting for Joe Biden. So I believe that the voters are actually making their opinions known, and they're making the decisions. The reason he is so far ahead in the delegate race is because they're looking for a steadiness, and they believe he's a person that can compromise. I'm not speaking for them. I'm just saying this is the results.
And then also a lot of people have been telling us that they voted for Joe Biden because they think he's the best candidate to beat Donald Trump.
Well, yeah,
right.
that's
right. Yeah, okay, Joel, go ahead.
The paradox that was just pointed out is very interesting and very important to understand, that the majority of voters in Illinois voted for Joe Biden. The majority also said in exit polls that they want Medicare for all. And that's become a broadly supported policy in the Democratic Party. So these are two opposite ideas, yet they do come together. And the challenge for Joe Biden is, if he wants to get the Sanders supporters enthusiastic, he's going to have to start talking about the policies that make them enthusiastic as well, that they're clearly very interested in, but maybe it's not enough to get them to vote for Bernie, but it's something they want to see enacted. And I think what we've seen with the coronavirus, just stepping back, is the complete confusion and essentially non-existent structure of the American healthcare system. And in a moment of crisis like this, it's highlighted, but there's a crisis every day in America for millions of Americans who don't have adequate health care. And that issue is not going to be addressed even by Joe Biden's policies and the way that he's laid them out. So this is not going to disappear, this discussion at
Joel,
all.
I want to ask you about something else, and that is that Joe Biden has actually lied incessantly during the campaign. We saw it again. He lied during the debate on last Sunday. In that respect, how does he differentiate himself from Donald Trump?
Well, I think that what we're going to have to really be worried about in the fall, when we have these debates, is the continual misinformation that's going to come at us from Donald Trump. He's an expert at that. I think that Joe Biden has made a lot of statements that he probably, in retrospect, would like to amend or edit or update. But the bigger challenge for him is going to be on his record that, for example, with trade agreements and the war in Iraq and other issues that Donald Trump ran to the other side of in 2016 quite effectively.
Yeah.
So the vice president's going to have to really point out how not only has he made different decisions since then or moved on, like in the case of Iraq, where he's explained how he moved us out of Iraq in the Obama administration, but he's going to have to be a little tighter in his response because Donald Trump's going to throw a lot of different curveballs at him. It's going to make it very hard for his supporters.
I want to get to Merrill Matthews. I'll get to you. I want to get to Merrill Matthews very quickly. Merrill Matthews, it seems, I think we can take it as a certainty right now, that Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee to take on Donald Trump. How is the Trump camp looking at this?
Oh, I think they would be happy with either one of them. They're probably more happy with Bernie Sanders because he does alienate a number of people. But just there is clearly the momentum is with Joe Biden right now. But at least according to Real Clear Politics, there's only about 300 pledge differences, 300 pledge votes difference in there. And you've got a lot of major states coming up in April. April 28th, you've got New York, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and a number of other states. So my guess is Joe Biden gets this, but I don't know that you want to write Bernie Sanders off completely.
Yeah, okay. Mary, you wanted to say something? I only got 40 seconds left.
Oh, I was just going to say that you'll also see Trump attack things like the Hunter Biden and all of these other things coming up.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you'll see someone like a Michael Bloomberg, who's pledged to put a lot of money into the Democratic campaign, hit with, attacks on the corruption of Trump's children and things like that.
Right.
So, yes, there'll be huge amounts of negative advertising, and there'll be attacks on Joe Biden, but there'll also be folks answering it.
Right.
And as Joel pointed out, Biden's really going to have to come quick and hard to actually fight all of these charges, because we know the kind of scorched earth policy that the Trump campaign will come up with, particularly if the economy isn't looking up.
Right. Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.